Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Wow, quiet crowd. What? It's a big day. Good morning, everyone. There we go. There we go. Okay. All right. Well, today I'm happy to see everyone here, and I'm also delighted to be joined by my friend and former Department of Justice colleague, Secretary Tom Perez from the Department of Labor, as well as Deputy Director Dan Ragsdale from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement within the Department of Homeland Security. Now, we are here today to announce a significant new step forward in the federal government's ongoing effort to end human trafficking. As many of you know, human traffickers prey on some of the most vulnerable members of our society to exploit them for labor, for sex, and for servitude of all kinds. Their crimes, appropriately described as modern-day slavery, have no place in this nation that has overcome the scourge of slavery itself. And that is why the Department of Justice is committed, and I am personally determined, to hold human traffickers accountable, to provide support to trafficking survivors, and to stand up for the rights and the dignity that they deserve. Now, in 2011, my predecessor as Attorney General, Eric Holder, joined forces with then Secretaries Napolitano and Solis to launch the Anti-Trafficking Coordination Team initiative, or ACTeam initiative, to coordinate and to streamline the interagency human trafficking enforcement efforts and to make them more effective than ever before. This was an important step. It was designed to complement efforts like Project Safe Childhood, the Innocence Lost National Initiative, both of which are focused on reducing child sexual exploitation. But the ACTeam initiative concentrated our enforcement efforts on labor trafficking, international sex trafficking, and the trafficking of adults by force, fraud, and coercion. We had 6 pilot cities across the country: Atlanta, El Paso, Kansas City, Los Angeles, Memphis, and Miami. The ACT teams received intensive training in cutting-edge anti-trafficking strategies. They operated as an integrated team of federal agents and federal prosecutors, and they coordinated closely with the national anti-trafficking experts and the Interagency Federal Enforcement Working Group. Now, I am so proud today to report that the results of this initiative have been extraordinary. In just the first 2 years, the number of prosecutions and convictions for human trafficking crimes rose significantly across the country, but were dramatically more pronounced in the ACTeam pilot districts, those 6 cities that I just referenced. There, we more than doubled the number of defendants charged and the number of cases filed. In the 2 years before we convened the ACT teams, those 6 districts had filed, by way of example, a total of 16 human trafficking cases against 35 defendants. But during the 2 years of Phase 1, they filed 35 cases against 75 defendants. They have contributed significantly to our overall nationwide progress in bringing human traffickers to justice. Now, why have these teams been so successful? Why is this a model that we are looking to replicate? Well, when federal officials, like the U.S. Attorney's offices, the FBI, Immigration, Customs Enforcement, Department of Labor, and the Civil Rights Division's Specialized Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit jointly commit to making the issue of human trafficking a top priority, they generate tremendous momentum. They harness this expertise. They harness the expertise, they streamline coordination, and they promote accountability to the interagency group of national human trafficking experts. Therefore, we get the support necessary to translate this momentum into the results that we are announcing today. Now, these results demonstrate the effectiveness of this ACTeam initiative, but the numbers alone do not convey the significance of the human stories behind these cases, the importance of this initiative, and the real reason why we have this focus. Frankly, it is the resilience of the survivors and the tireless work of our law enforcement men and women to restore freedom to those enslaved that inspired this effort and, in fact, inspired the prioritization of human trafficking in this Department of Justice. Now, in just 2 short years, the ACT teams dismantled a 10-defendant, multi-district sex and labor trafficking ring that exploited dozens of young women in El Paso, Texas. They brought down a Miami-based sex trafficking enterprise that stretched as far as Australia, and they secured over $700,000 in restitution for a victim of a Kansas City-based sex trafficking conspiracy. Now, these, of course, are impressive numbers, and we talk about cases all the time in our announcements. But behind each of these cases, there is a human life. By way of example, one young woman from a remote village in Mexico had been working since the age of 12 to help feed her impoverished family. In her early 20s, she met a man who seemed to be the answer to her dreams. He promised her marriage, a better job, and a way out of this life of grinding poverty. And this man drew her in with his deception and with his lies. Before she knew it, she was isolated from everyone she knew. She found herself smuggled into the United States, and there her life devolved into a series of beatings, threats, and rape. Trapped in a life of forced prostitution until she courageously made her escape. And it literally was an escape. Now, survivors like this young woman are the reason that we launched the ACTeam initiative. And in fact, the dedicated agents who assisted her following her escape were members of the Atlanta ACTeam. Now, as she herself explained to the court that heard her case, meeting federal agents who were willing to listen and believe her was a vital turning point. And the agents' commitment to a victim-centered, trauma-informed approach was instrumental in helping her reclaim her life and in bringing her traffickers to justice. It's a victory for the entire ACTeam that one of her traffickers was sentenced to over 20 years in prison. But it's even more significant a victory to see this young woman restored to a life of freedom and dignity, the life that we all deserve. Now, the prosecution results that the ACTeams received are victories because they transform the lives of victims like this young woman. But these victories are a testament to the power of the interagency partnership, and they remind us of what we can achieve when we work together. Today, I am pleased to announce that we are building on the success of Phase 1 of this project and launching Phase 2 of the ACTeam initiative. Phase 2 will expand the footprint of this initiative in new districts throughout the country. It will incorporate an array of innovations that will further enhance training, coordination, enforcement, as well as victim support. Starting today, interagency teams of federal enforcement partners representing each of our departments are invited to apply for selection in a competitive interagency selection process. The Phase 2 ACTeam sites will be designated by interagency consensus, and we'll be announcing those in the coming months. I am today calling on all U.S. attorneys to confer with the FBI, Labor, and Homeland Security leadership in their districts to apply for Phase 2 and to serve as leaders in the forefront of this effort. And I look forward to working with these new districts once they are selected. Now, I have to thank all of the agents, the prosecutors, and the law enforcement officials whose tireless work and relentless focus have made our anti-trafficking efforts such a success so far. I especially would like to recognize the Executive Office of U.S. Attorneys and the U.S. Attorneys' offices, the invaluable contributions of the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, and specifically the leadership of Secretary Johnson and Director Comey, who have made DHS and the FBI critical members of this partnership. Also, our own civil division's Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit has helped make these ACTeam initiatives so effective. Now, although Secretary Johnson was not able to join us today, I'm really grateful that Deputy Director Ragsdale, as well as other partners from Immigration and Customs Enforcement Headquarters, are here. And finally, I want to thank all of our partners across this administration and the country for their unwavering commitment and outstanding work. And above all, I want to express my gratitude to the courageous survivors of human trafficking who day in and day out work hand in hand with federal agents and prosecutors to ensure that their voices are heard in our courts and that their traffickers are brought to justice. They are the true heroes in this enterprise. Now, at this time, I'd like to turn things over to Secretary Tom Perez, who has been an outstanding partner in this and so many initiatives, as well as a dedicated leader for the ACTeam initiative. Tom, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Madam Attorney General. It's an honor to be back here and back home here in the Department of Justice, and thank you so much for representing the Department of Homeland Security, who is obviously a critical component in our efforts to combat human trafficking. I've been involved on and off in the efforts to combat human trafficking for over 2 decades, and it's remarkable how far we have come as a nation, not simply as a federal government. I recall being the first line supervisor in a case involving the Thai garment workers in El Monte in California, roughly 2 decades ago. In that case, we were able to bring the perpetrators to justice. We learned a lot about human trafficking, and then as a result of the leadership of Janet Reno, an interagency task force on worker exploitation was established. I had the privilege of co-chairing that task force back when I had more hair. And as a result of that task force, remarkable things happened, including bipartisan legislation that has served as really the fulcrum and the linchpin of the federal efforts. The establishment of dedicated units within the Civil Rights Division, led today and so ably by my friend and colleague Hillary ACTeam in the Civil Rights Division. And so now we have come from the world of ad hoc prosecutions to a four-legged stool of collaboration. One leg of that stool is the work that the federal government is doing. Another leg of that stool is our state and local partners. Another leg of that stool are our nonprofit and faith communities that are such critical bridges as we seek to help victims. And then that fourth leg of the stool are our international partners. And so we have come a long way over these 20 years in our knowledge and understanding of human trafficking and how we deal with it. And as a result of that knowledge and understanding, we have been able to help exponentially more people. And I want to thank Republicans and Democrats in Congress who have done this. The ACTeam is an example of what we are doing with our federal partners across this country. And as the Attorney General has described, they have been so successful and such a great example of innovative partnership across the federal government, helping to solve some of our most troubling and at times seemingly intractable challenges. The challenges we face as a nation and a government demand these unprecedented levels of interagency collaboration, and that's exactly what the ACTeams are doing. We're working together as never before, bringing our respective departments' collective resources and expertise to bear, imploding stovepipes, building an even greater than the sum of the parts opportunity and mentality to the venture. The ACTeam initiative has become a successful cutting-edge federal law enforcement effort over recent years. Under Phase 1, as the Attorney General correctly pointed out, we have seen dramatic results and dramatic success. And I am so proud of the work that the Department of Labor is doing. I remember meeting with the Department of Labor, who was a critical part of the Interagency Task Force in the 90s. And they bring so much to bear. My colleagues in the Wage and Hour Division have been important players in this. My colleagues in the Inspector General's office remain vigorous partners, and they will remain vigorous partners in Phase 2. Because although we don't directly investigate trafficking in persons cases, that is led by our colleagues here in the Civil Rights Division, we have eyes and ears across the country. And we have trained our wage and hour inspectors, our wage and hour and our IG investigators to understand and detect and serve as the eyes and ears for our prosecutorial partners in the efforts to combat human trafficking. And we also know that many victims of human trafficking are entitled to restitution for work that has been done. And so we continue to help calculate restitution amounts for trafficking victims and to partner with others around employment and training services for survivors, because our goal is to provide holistic services for victims of human trafficking. And the Department of Labor is so critically important in that effort, because survivors of this horrific, unspeakable experience need to have the opportunity to find meaningful work and to get on a pathway to normalcy that has eluded them regrettably as a result of the unspeakable victimization. And as the Attorney General pointed out, these partnerships at their core are about helping people. It is so fulfilling to see the victims of the El Monte tragedy, many of whom are now U.S. citizens, and many of whom are now helping victims of trafficking because they've walked in their shoes. And they are invaluable partners. They are Americans, and they are doing so much. And so this partnership moving forward, we will continue our efforts. And at the Labor Department, our Wage and Hour Division has begun completing law enforcement declarations for T-visa applications, which provide immigration relief to certain victims of human trafficking who help law enforcement in detection, investigation, and or prosecution of trafficking crimes. Our Wage and Hour Division also continues to provide law enforcement certifications for applications of U visas, which provide immigration relief to victims of certain qualifying criminal activities who are willing to cooperate with law enforcement. We've expanded those qualifying criminal activities we will consider for U visa certification to now include instances where we detect extortion, forced labor, and fraud in foreign labor contracting. And so as part of our enhanced coordination with DOJ and our enhanced coordination with DHS, we have begun receiving referrals for potential violations of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Because this is important, because sometimes we are able to bring civil cases under the laws that we enforce. The burden of proof is lower, and these are cases where at times it may be difficult to surmount the hurdles of bringing a criminal case. And so this is one of the ways that we can add value to our overall administration efforts to help bring perpetrators to justice and to help victims of crime. And I know I speak for everyone in this room in saying that trafficking is a blight on our shared humanity, a contemptible, unspeakable act worthy of condemnation and prosecution. And I am so pleased to be part of this effort. And I am excited to continue in these efforts. And I want to say thank you, Madam Attorney General, because Janet Reno moved forward on this. Attorney General Ashcroft and others move forward on this. We continue to raise the bar. This is not a partisan issue. This never will be a partisan issue. And that is why I'm so excited to be here, moving forward together and collaboratively with our partners here at the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and our other federal partners. So thank you so much for having me. And I think I will turn it back to you.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Questions? We've stunned you into silence. This is our banner day. I knew it wouldn't happen to you, Devlin.
I apologize. You've talked a lot about how you're changing the enforcement component of this, and you've talked a little bit about how you're doing outreach to victims. As you're changing the law enforcement component, one of the concerns about human trafficking has always been that a lot of the victims end up back in similar circumstances to what they've been rescued from. What has changed in the outreach in the same time that you're changing how you investigate the crime?
You know, one of the key prongs of this is, in fact, enhance victim support services. What Phase 1 showed us was that that was an essential part of the success there, and that we needed to really focus on what the victims were telling us that they needed. We also partner with, as the Secretary mentioned, NGOs, that is to say support organizations as well, to provide services. We try and provide essentially a bridge for these survivors back into a normal life. Some of them choose to return to their homeland, some choose to stay here. They are able to apply for citizenship, they're able to apply for certain types of visas, and they do receive extensive support services. And that is it's a very, very, very important part of what Phase 2 will contain as well.
I hate to shift gears a little bit, but there was a decision a few blocks away from here that came down this morning. The court is often accused of being political, but in this case you had Chief Justice Roberts siding with the administration in the ruling. But what are your thoughts about the court's decision today, and what does it say about where the court is?
There were two decisions today. One on the healthcare. Well, obviously, I haven't had a chance to read the decision yet, but we were certainly, from what I've read, we're pleased with the result. And I believe the President is actually going to be providing comments on that a little bit later this morning, so I'll defer comments on that decision to him.
On the, keep switching gears, the South Carolina, the tragic shootings there, is the department moving towards filing civil rights violations against Mr. Roof?
As we've indicated, we've opened a hate crimes investigation into the matter. At this point, we are gathering evidence and undertaking all of the investigative steps that we need to. It simply is premature at this point to be able to announce whether the charges will be state, federal, what they will encompass, but I can say that this matter is being looked at by all of the appropriate investigative and prosecutive agencies with a view towards providing justice for those victims.
Just to build off that question a little bit, can you walk us through the calculus for a decision that gets made in terms of the factors that are weighed for whether a state prosecution versus a federal prosecution would be most appropriate when you have a situation like this?
You know, at this point, it would be speculative to go into that regarding this case. I can tell you that in general, again, we always work closely with our state and local counterparts and consult with them. And once all the evidence is gathered, once all the factors are considered, we all sit down and make the decision as to what is the best means of proceeding with a particular case. But with respect to this case, it's premature at this point, and I'm not going to speculate as to how we're going to have those discussions and that analysis. We're just not there yet.
For the peace of mind of people who still live down in that area, any evidence so far of a broader conspiracy beyond the young man?
You know, I'm not able to comment on what the investigation is or is not showing. I'm sorry about that. I know people have those concerns, but what I can say is that this matter is under active investigation, and we are looking carefully at all angles of this case.
One,
Back to that.
There was also a decision on disparate impact by the Supreme Court. I'm sure Secretary Perez is happy about that one. I'm curious if you are hopeful that that is a positive sign for future enforcement of the Voting Rights Act, because it's been suggested that could have implications that would give the Justice Department a way forward in terms of future enforcement on voting rights.
Well, tremendously pleased with the decision involving the disparate impact claims and the fact that they are cognizable under the Fair Housing Act. That was our position. We certainly think it's been an important tool in the cases that we have brought, and we think it's very, very important in vindicating the rights of all Americans to live wherever they want in this great country, free of discrimination. We'll be looking at that decision and determining how best to utilize it in other areas, if at all. At this point, you know, it's a little premature to say how that's going to go, but we will be looking at that. And I will say that with respect to voting rights cases, the Department's commitment to enforcing the Voting Rights Act remains strong and will continue to be strong.
Last question.
back to South Carolina, if I have one more question. Can you explain to us the thinking behind a domestic terrorism charge as opposed to not a domestic terrorism charge in this case?
Well, you know, I think at this point it's really premature to talk about the specific statutes that may be applicable in this case. As I've indicated, when you look at the nature of hate crimes in America in generally, hate crimes are the original domestic terrorism. The original domestic terrorist organization, the first one so designated, was the Klan. So these types of cases that involve hatred of with racial animus are specifically seen as domestic terrorism. Every fact pattern generates the applicability of different statutes, whether they're state, federal, whatever they may encompass. So I think it's premature at this point to talk about specific statutes that may be used, but I do think that from an historical context, it is important to note that hate crimes are the original domestic terrorism.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
If I could just get in one last question. On the
Why would you
OPM,
two me 2 seconds?
on the OPM hack, I wonder if you could speak to the aggression and possible prosecution in connection with that investigation, and also to your colleagues throughout government who may have been impacted by that hack.
Well, with respect to any potential action or prosecution, it really is too early to provide any information on that. So I'm sorry I'm not able to give you an update on that. We're still looking into that matter very, very actively, and it is ongoing. So I'm simply not able to give you an update on that. What I can say is that a number of government workers have received notification that sensitive information may have been compromised. This is, of course, an issue of grave concern to all of us who both hold that information and who are, in fact, also government workers. So steps are being taken to provide everyone with information about how to best protect their credit profile and their data. I urge everyone to read all of the information that is being provided on this from your respective agencies, to take all of the necessary steps that are being offered to protect sensitive data, and also to be, even personally, ever more vigilant. It's really important that people look out for the misuse of their data in ways that we may not be able to anticipate, and to report that if it occurs. This is a very, very troubling matter. I think it highlights the fact that cybersecurity is one of the gravest issues that we face as a nation, and we see this coming in many, many different ways. Whether it's a company being hacked, whether it's a database being hacked, it is in fact a matter of grave concern and is being taken very seriously throughout government at this time. Thank you all.